currently muted. The organizer and presenter have the ability to share their screen with the attendees. As you can notice by looking at your screen right now, you can see Richard's picks in the bottom left with the name of the webinar up ahead. So using this, the entire presentation will be shared. For the attendees, you'll have a toolbar on the top right-hand side of your screen. With this toolbar, you can access two important things. The first is the raised hand button. This is generally used when we are taking verbal questions. If during the allocated question time at the end, the presenter allows for verbal questions, select this button and it will highlight you to the facilitator and organizers. The second is the option to type in a question that will be seen by the facilitator and organizers. Due to potential mic problems amongst attendees, we often default to written questions. In this scenario, I will transfer any of the questions to a Word document that can be seen by all participants via the share screen function. Please feel free to send through written questions during the presentation. I shall keep track of them and display them during the question period. Thank you, and over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Richard Givers, and as Wendell said, I'm the founder of Open Data Durban. Before we move on, I would just like to let you know that if you'd like to follow this presentation on your own computer, or at a later point, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen at the moment, you will see a bit.ly link. So if you type in bit.ly/ODDOXAFM3, bit.ly/ODDOXFAM3, it will take you to this presentation, and it will enable you to click through on links and on any other additional resources that I've added into the presentation through linking or through videos or pictures. And so if you'd like to follow along, that's how you can do it. So as Wendell mentioned, today we're going to be talking about opportunities in civic technology for CSOs in South Africa. This forms the third of three webinars where we've been talking about open data, civic technology, and their role in South Africa for community-based organizations and NPOs. And I would really encourage you to take a look at the other two. The first one dealt with data tools and ways that we can work with our own data within our organizations and use data and statistics for functions like reporting and monitoring and evaluation. And there were some useful ways of working collaboratively on our computers, working together in different locations online, as well as a number of different ways of showing and displaying data, including infographics, putting data onto a map, and other kinds of things. The second day we focused a lot on the different types of techies that one can work with as a CSO. We focused on websites, we focused on digital agencies, and then just went through and on data scientists or civic technologists. And then we went through some of the ideas around how to work with techies and some of the disconnects between technologists and CBOs. So today we're going to focus on opportunities in civic technology. And the way we're going to do that is to go through some examples of where there's been successful collaboration in technology for CBOs, and then to also talk about some exciting and new programs and some existing programs that are available. Just to give a little bit of context, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that's me, that's my picture, that's my Twitter handle. Open Data Durban is a civic technology non-profit that aims to build powerful and insightful tools to understand the city and to bring about positive social change. And how we plan to do that is to implement and advocate for opening of data, opening of governments, and civic technology through projects, events, workshops, and data quests, which is what we call hackathons. What we mean by opening data is opening up data that governments and other parts of sectors of society gather about us and about the way we live and about our economy and our social situation, and giving access to that to all different parts of society to use for their own benefits and for the benefit of society, including CSOs and CBOs such as ourselves, including the media, including governments, including business and private citizens. the way that we envisage people using this data is to build tools, websites, apps, projects, infographics, posters that we call or bundle under the term or name civic technology, which is really the transfer of information between governments and other organizations and people. And then we see this happening, and we're very community focused and community minded. We don't think that we have all the answers or that we can even know all the problems. And so we are seeking to build up an active, diverse community that really is anyone who's interested in making a difference, to be able to come and engage with data and technology. And then data and technology can, instead of being a discriminator or something that sets people apart, can turn more into something that is inclusive and something that's able to make a difference. And so that's just a little bit about where we are and where we come from. My background is that I worked as an economist for eight or 9 years, moving heavily into technology and data before deciding to run this MPO. And so I've come from a very technical background, and I'm starting to learn to use these skills for good. So as I mentioned, the outline of what we're going to speak to today is really just two things. We're going to go through in depth some amazing examples of civic technology partnering with civil society. So where technology hasn't been the star of the show, but where a civil society organization's project or initiative has been able to reach more people and have a deep impact and be a bigger star of the show because of the use of technology. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is opportunities for partnerships going forward. So anyone that has listened to the last 2 days and really listens to any of us talk at the moment, when I say us, I mean the civic technology movement, it must be sick to death of us talking about WASIMAP. And so if you've been part of the last 2 webinars, you will have seen this twice, and so I'm hoping to just be very brief on this. But essentially, WASIMAP is a tool that was initially built to help journalists understand the context of the area they were writing about. And this is just one aspect that we haven't spoken about before. It was created out of a partnership between Code for South Africa and Media Monitoring Africa. Now, I will be talking about Code for South Africa projects a lot. Code for South Africa is a key partner of Open Data Durban and very responsible for us being where we are as an organization. And really, Code for South Africa has been leading and driving the civic technology movement and the open data movement in South Africa since it started back in 2011. And so really, as pioneers and as people that are making a difference, there's going to be a lot of focus on their projects. To talk a little bit about the partnership aspect of WASIMAP. This came out of an understanding that sometimes journalists would write articles and write about an angle or a part of the story that really ignored the socio-economic, demographic context of the area they were writing about, and they had very little ability to compare areas. So for all of us, if I say 50 million, that sounds like a big number. So maybe if there was 50 million rand in corruption or 50 million taps running. But what we often don't realize with data is context. And so in a game or in a story where we're talking about billions, maybe 500 billion, 50 million might only be a very small fraction of that. And when we see something, we're sometimes misled in the media or in reports or in statistics. We can sometimes be misled if we don't have a context or an understanding of what that was talking about. And so WASIMAP, and we've been through it, as I said, is literally just an online tool that enables us to understand the statistics of the area we're talking about. And so it goes all the way down to ward level, but if we look at KwaZulu-Natal, it gives us understanding of the population and election statistics, demographic statistics, and households, etc. And this is very useful because we can engage with these. We can compare places side by side. So we can compare KwaZulu-Natal to the Western Cape. And so if I'm a journalist, I can be maybe writing about a situation like access to toilets and covered toilets, which is been one of the buzz topics in the news, and something that's a real issue and a real problem. But I can now go and understand what that might be around the country, and whether what's happening in terms of service delivery, and what the economic factors are, and what is the real story, the context that frames the story I'm writing. So this is really interesting because, firstly, Media Monitoring Africa, naturally being a group that is very concerned with justice and democracy, especially through the media and through the access to information and transparency, as part of what their mission is, this now serves to be a tool that they can give to their key users, which are journalists and etc. and the media, to be able to properly provide, to be able to give them a tool which makes their impact bigger and more real. But what's also been very interesting is that WYSIMAP is used for far greater uses than its original intention. They're now creating a WYSIMAP for schools, or WYSI for schools, and it's going to be used in educating children about about the country and the country they live in. And it's also used a lot by researchers, by governments for their community profiles, and by people just to understand the context. It can even be used by businesses to understand their market. And so this interesting collaboration between a CSO or an NPO and Code for South Africa, a Civic Technology Institute, led to something really big happening, and to a project which really describes a perfect example of what we are saying with open data, with civic technology, and with impact. Because the data that's sitting behind, or that WYSIMAP is drawn from, is the census 2011 that's carried out by Statistics South Africa. But it's in a format which is very difficult to use, and something which, because of that, just doesn't get used. And so we didn't see journalists digging into stats SA data to be able to understand the context of what they're writing about. But when they were given a civic technology tool, so when this open data was transformed into something that was a civic technology data tool in WYSIMAP, it enabled use and impact. And especially, and it's not the app and it's not the website, but it's the impact of really helping us to understand the country. That's important. Now, understanding demographics and economics and social situations is something that's important to everyone, and that's not something that technology, the technology can replace. Or all that the technology is doing is giving us an easier, potentially easier, more understandable way, and more accessible way to this information. What will be great is when we can start seeing, and I know this is definitely in the pipeline, is when we can start seeing these tools even in different languages, and that will enable bigger access. And so we need to be very cognizant of the fact that when we use technology, that we can sometimes, and quite often, discriminate against people who don't have access, or who have bad access to the internet, or battle with connection or bandwidth. And so I think that's always an important thing to remember. But that's also why the second example we'd like to talk about is this, the / Make All Voices Count. Now we're very lucky today to be joined by Elroy, who I haven't met in person, but is from the / and so it was very exciting that I was really going to be talking about this amazing group of projects that the / has been doing, partnering with Code for South Africa. But just to let you know, we're not going to play the video because of concerns over internet and connection, but this is really a great story, and what it speaks to. And I encourage you, if you have the kind of bandwidth, to just watch this. It's a YouTube video, 5-minute video, which speaks to the project that the / did, which was with community partners to use data from the measuring and monitoring programs to create a dialogue between government service and communities. So the video that I would like you to watch, if you can, illustrates one of the many dialogues that have taken place across the country with the help of data and analysis and presentation by Code for South Africa. So here we have the / which is a movement for human rights, and has got incredible heritage and history, that is now providing the bridge of information between government departments and service delivery and citizens. And the way that this was delivered was, in fact, initially in the no-tech environment. And that's, I think, what's quite exciting, because what happened is there was data analysis done around levels of service delivery and community engagement with government. But the result of this analysis was to make an infographic that was printed on a poster, on a big poster that could be central to this round group of discussion with people sitting in chairs looking at the poster, and then also printed on A4 pieces of paper that was handed out to every person there, that they could engage with the data about the government services and the impact on communities and what the current level of services was, which meant that they were able to talk about these and to create a dialogue about what could be done and what are issues for them at the moment. And this is just a great example of, yes, there has been technology or data used here. There's definitely been a level of understanding services and putting that into a poster and a visual demographic, which is really nice, because a picture, and as we spoke about in the first day, a really well created visualization or picture of the data, like a graph or a map, will do far more than writing about it will. But also that this was not then delivered through an online tool that you had to access. You could only access if you had internet and the ability to have data or whatever, or a computer. But this was actually then given out in a deliverable which could be used by people and meet them where they were. And so I think this was really a great tool, and it led to this community-based monitoring tool, which is actually now also great, because it enables this to be happening across the country where there is access to internet. And as we found out yesterday, and as we know already from probably from our own knowledge, but also from the Oxfam webinar series, that smartphone penetration is very high in the country, and that we can also be focusing on people that do have access to technology. Now, I became aware of this community-based monitoring tool. I was aware of it happening as a result of being a partner of Code Per Se, but I haven't seen it yet until it was shared by Elroy just before this webinar. But I think this is fantastic. I had a quick look through it, and I think that as an online tool and what it enables, so talking about why we're doing community-based monitoring, gathering and analyzing information from the service user's point of view, I think that is so critical, interesting to talk about, because this focus on a user and the focus on the need and the problem of a user is something that has actually been responsible for most of the successful companies that exist at the moment, and something that we're starting to understand, whether you're a government or you're a business or you're a CBO or you have anything, when you're trying to provide a solution, that there's so often too much of a focus on the solution and not on the problem and the person who has it. And what Blacksash has done so amazingly here is to focus, okay, well, who am I? What is my problem as a community member, and how can I be met and my needs be met? And you can see the CBM cycle, and you can also, if you would like, a lot of this can be printed, the infographics around service delivery and community engagement and all this kind of thing. It is accessible here to be printed, and I think that this is an amazing full example of how both a non-tech and a tech solution can be used together to create impact and to make a difference. And so another just great example of the CBO working with the technology movement to make a difference. So another really interesting example here is the talking about open bylaws. And so now I'm sure that most of you are aware that bylaws are the laws that municipalities are passed that determine things like how loud we can be with our neighbors and how many dogs we can have, and all of these sorts of local and really important kind of laws. So when you go to trying to access a bylaw, very often you'll find it's in PDF format. You'll find that maybe the PDF isn't even a text PDF. So in other words, the words in the PDF can be highlighted and copied into a document, but that the PDF is in fact a picture of the bylaw, which means that there is almost no way to be able to reproduce it or copy it or use it in anything we need, and that when we're looking through the document, we have to literally go page by page. And so what Code for South Africa, and this was created by the lead technologist of Code for South Africa, Greg Kemp, has done is he's created a platform and created a community around this platform where bylaws are freely available and able to be accessed. They're easy to read and they're easy to share, so that we can start discussing, okay, well, what does eThekwini think about how many dogs we could have, and what is the difference between that and Cape Town? Or what can I do about a noisy neighbor? Or what is the bylaw? What are the bylaws concerning beaches or concerning parks? And recently, my organization, Open Data Durban, led a day where previously there had only been Cape Town and Johannesburg bylaws online. And we held a day where we opened up the space and said, hey, anyone who's interested in coming and putting eThekwini bylaws online, come along. And it was quite amazing. We got a room where lawyers, interested citizens, and technologists, so techies, were in the same room doing the same thing. The lawyers obviously giving us a lot of advice about how we can put the bylaws online, technologists getting interested in the technology. I mean, I think for some people, it was the first time that a lawyer and a programmer had a serious conversation together about something they could do together. Those typically being quite far apart. And so that was quite interesting. Now, the really great part about Open Bylaws is that, so unlike some of the projects we were talking about before that were led by the CSO firstly, and then the technology followed, this was something that came out of an interested citizen. So when Greg sat down to write Open Bylaws and to just make bylaws more accessible to people, he just felt as a citizen, as an active citizen, this is something that's important. Subsequently, it was led to a creation of the tool, and we can have a quick look through it now. And so you can see that when you go onto Open Bylaws, it just tells you here are South African bylaws, freely available and easy to read and share. If we click into, and I'm going to focus on eThekwini because those are the ones we did, and the other day we literally gathered and put these on. We've got a couple more to do. But we can click into, for example, the nuisance behavior in public places. So basically the public nuisance bylaw, which has just been commenced in eThekwini. And we can find out what happens, what about noise? So, for example, what noise is someone allowed to create in a public place? One of the things that I found more interesting was what are the laws around skating and roller skating and other dangerous acts as it describes. So interestingly, no person in a public place skates on roller skates or skateboard or similar device except where permitted by municipality. So that wasn't something I knew before, but very interesting one. But essentially, while I'm talking, you can see that the ability to click through and understand this bylaw to get to any of the sections. Something that's really important is definitions, which is great. And every time there's a definition, it will pop up with an explanation of what the definition, with the actual definition for the word. And I can download this and share this as both a PDF or a web page. And if I'm interested, I could actually take sections of this bylaw out and I could write about them or put them into a website. And so maybe if I was a journalist or I was a CBO working and wanted to write a blog post or an online project or something that referenced laws that had to do with my work, I could take this and I could share it, I could tweet it, I can download it, or I can even, with a technologist, build it into a website and somewhere where it's referenced. So we have this project, which is great as it stood, but obviously the work of one person that's now starting to grow a community around it. But subsequently, the South African Legal Information Institute, Southern African, so SAFLI and African Lee, are now using the platform to publish their laws. And so we've now got 2 CSOs that have found this technology useful because this, in the light of most of civic technology and the open data movement also being open source, it makes absolute sense for us to work together, and there's no commercial issues with joining together. And so Greg was very easily, and Code for South Africa, were very easily able to join with these CSOs or these MPOs to be able to help them in their mission and to share the tool with them. And furthermore, they were able to access funding to build the tool to be more robust, so to improve the tool and update this tool, Open Bylaws, this website, to meet the needs of the CSO. And so that's very interesting, because as we start to see the thread of these examples, we start to understand that, you know, WASIMAP was a partnership between Media Monitoring Africa and Code for South Africa to service journalists, but it had a much bigger impact. The work of the Black Sash and then the work with the community monitoring had specific focuses, and they were able to grow into something much bigger, and now into a full platform and tool that can be used countrywide to change the life of citizens. Open Bylaws was someone who was sitting in his room thinking about this needing to be happening, an active citizen, created something which has created a community, and which has created something which is able to make an impact on the work of an MPO, and I think that's really interesting. So we've got different types of perspectives of how these things come about, but they're all very useful tools. So the next one I wanted to go through, which is I think one that's quite interesting because it's something that we're actually taking on in Durban ourselves, and because I think that this is one of the more important, not that there's a ranking, but this is a very important issue. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Green Alert. So this is a tool that lets citizens know when environmental impact applications are happening. So you can find, monitor, and engage with applications in specify locations and topics that you care about. So just to go through it quickly. So what we have here is this Green Alert tool. It just explains to us a little bit about what goes on, and it talks about the EIAs, so basically environmental impact assessments. And environmental impact assessments are so important because anytime any development happens, whether a company wants to build a mine or a development or a housing gated community, or they want to do anything, any type of development, an EIA is needed, an environmental impact assessment. Now, something that's really important for citizens is that they understand when environmental impact assessments happen. We've seen cases in the north of KwaZulu-Natal where mines have been built very close to the town of Mtumzini, and every time a strong wind blows from the south, the whole town gets covered in mine dust. We've seen right now there's an application for a mine to be built on the southern tip of Shishlu, and it's not clear as to what the impact of that might be. We've also seen the destruction of ecologically important sites because there was enough awareness about the EIA, or the EIA was managed to be passed through sometimes fraudulently or sometimes just with not enough attention given to them. And the sad thing about the environment is that once it's gone, it's gone. So once an EIA has been passed, once the concrete has been laid, essentially you can almost always never get, almost always you're never able to get that back. So where this is so critical is this is starting to say, hey, as citizens, we need to know about these environmental impact assessments. We need to be able to band together and understand them. And so we can either do a search, or we can use our location for stuff that's happening in my area. Because it's taking a long time, I'm just going to go to this map here. But it looks like the internet's not going to, okay, no, it's going to behave. So the way that this project came about was that Code for Africa, who is a partner of Open Data Durban and Code for SAS, and who is a federation of the Code for movement across Africa. So in other words, this is an organization that coordinates code for Nigeria, code for Ethiopia, code for Kenya, etc., apart from South Africa. And it's really quite an amazing movement because we see these kind of civic technology, open data projects making a difference across the continent. But this one was done in South Africa in a partnership with Oxpeckers and a couple of others, and I'll go into the partnership just now. But essentially, they got environmental impact assessment data, and they loaded it into a database, and they put that data onto a map. And so if I click into and click and click and click, I can go and see the details of projects that are happening potentially around me. And so if I want to learn more, it will take me to the EIA for the proposed Kwadabeka A infill housing project, and it will give me all of the details. And so it tells me the ID, what's going on, the municipality, the areas, where it's impacting on, what's going to be happening, who the applicant is, and then it allows me to follow this and to share and embed it. And so if I'm a CSO that's interested in the environment, or if I'm a CBO that might be interested even in housing or in anything to do with development, then I'm able to now follow this and follow updates and to share and embed it. This is a prototype version of this site, and so what Open Data Durban is doing right now is we're creating a sustainable link between the government and to other stakeholders to try and make this website even better. And it's going to soon be able to, we're going to be able to link up petitioning. So if I want to petition a consultant, I can. And if I want to connect to other people who are interested, I can. And I think this is really powerful because it shows that both interested organizations and interested citizens have the power to get involved in decisions that really might adversely affect them or might positively affect them, and they can have their say, and we can really start to get in some engagement about the how development happens, how to prioritize our various socioeconomic needs, and just to understand the environment around us. So what's really great about this, again, is that it was done in collaboration with Oxpeckers, who's an environmental media or journalism NPO, as well as African News Innovation Challenge and the Society of Environmental Journalists. So a couple of things, and something I'll reiterate or talk about a bit later as well, but what's very interesting is you're starting to perhaps see a little bit of a connection with the media and how important it is to engage with the media, or sometimes the media as a partner in our projects. Naturally, the media's role is to link people to the stories of what's going on and to the truth, and to enforce transparency and good governance through information. And as CSOs and CBOs, we are at the face of where things are happening, of where real need is, of where problems are. And so being able to connect people to those and understand those needs and those problems is really critical. And so I think that you'll see a little bit more about this as we go through, but something that's very important in our projects is how can we build in a role for the media, how can we get information out about what we're doing. Another project example I wanted to go through was a collaboration between Mfundo Kwazi and Code for South Africa, and a School of Data fellow that was working with Code for South Africa at the time, and Code for South Africa at the time. So this is a really interesting one because this is now, Mfundo Kwazi is an NPO that exists for the poor and for the marginalized. And they wanted to understand how they could build something that could explain to people where the city's money is going, and also to keep the city accountable, to make sure that they weren't focusing only on the rich and the people that are privileged and have, but also that there was focus on the poor and on the people in dire need and in great need. And so what they did was they built the Cape Town Budget Project. And so this is a project which goes through the Cape Town budget, and it visualizes the data. And by that, and so remember what we were speaking about, where the power of data and technology is often to be able to tell a story without needing to explain or have words, but be able to get an issue or a need or a situation across in a very summarized and easy to understand way. And so now if we go through this, we can understand how the city is spending the money of the ratepayers. And so we can see that the total budget is 37.5 billion rand, and it's split between an operational budget and a capital budget. You can understand, you can see that as we go, the things happen live. You can understand where the capital budget is made up of. And importantly, the focus of this site or this main page at the moment is on sort of services. And that's as we dive, so we can see this firstly tells us all the different main sections the budget is made up of. Then we can understand what parts in this one section of utility services, water and sanitation makes a part of. And then we can actually go into some facts about sanitation in Cape Town. And so I think this data is a little bit old, but it tells us that there are almost 130,000 informal structures and informal settlements in Cape Town. 8% of Cape Town households have no access to sanitation on site, so 1 in 12. That over 48,000 households in Cape Town use a bucket toilet system. But essentially that we can understand the story very fast through a tool which takes data that is open and public, and through the initiative, and so the initiative especially of a CSO that really cares about a certain issue or need, and we can build it into a tool which potentially will let people understand more about this issue. To speak a little bit more about this, we see that as we go through it, it also gives us the ability to engage with an interactive map. And so we can go and we can click on certain things, and that will tell us in certain wards, it will tell us what the ward budgets are and how their spending happens. And so if we go out for Ward 62, it can both tell us their expenditures as well as who the councillor is. And this is quite powerful information because we can start to hold our government to account. And this is essentially us as private citizens or active citizens or interested organizations can join together with Independent or Quasi and their mission to make sure that there is a focus on the right sorts of needs, and that there isn't a marginalization of people, and that there isn't a focus on the rich at the expense of the poor. And especially housing. I mean, housing is a really interesting topic in Cape Town right now. And so I think that there's always these critical factors, and that us as civil society, you know, if we can use these tools to explain it to a broader group of people, we can potentially have more impact. And so also looking through some of the major budget projects planned gives us an idea of where the city is thinking and what they're prioritizing. And so this is a really, again, another tool where there is an example of how civic technology and the CSO can work together to do something. Interesting part about this project is that the follow item, and so I mean often, you know, and I mean even in this presentation I could be accused of focusing too much on the flashy app or the interesting website. And so something that was really interesting that came out of this is that people would query the city about certain things that this tool brought up. So because there is the interactive map that we can really dive into issues with, because there is the ability to access the open data, the raw data that you can download, you know, and we can go through some of the budget breakdown. It obviously raised a lot of questions. And as far as I understand the project and the next steps, one of the challenges was that on the city side, so on the city of Cape Town, they didn't have the resources or the processes set up to be able to respond to requests, or they just didn't, requests and queries. And so I think this is also a very good example to talk to as we start to think of, well, what are the tools that we can build what are the projects and the initiatives we can carry out as CSOs? How do we bring civic technology into our impact and our mission? One of the main things, as I said before, is the focus on the user and the problem. But I think also in implementation of projects, or when we try to carry out projects, one of the main things we need to focus on is humans and process. And so often, especially as techies, we're worried about whether the technical solution will work. And really what we're understanding is the technical solution is often the easiest part. So whether it's building the website or building the app, what is very difficult is to get this tool used and to get the kind of processes set up that makes it transfer for something that's interesting information and informative to something that has a real change. And so I think the next steps for the Cape Town budget project and in Open Data Durban, we're building a Durban budget project. Something we're engaging with the city about is this something that would be useful for the city to use to give information to people? And would there be resources that would be able to be put towards maintaining this and to answering questions and queries? And so I think that's that's an incredibly important aspect to this that often gets overlooked. Right, you've got the website, you've got the tool. Now what's next? How does this make a difference? Is this transferring into real change? Is this going to lead to citizens understanding and making a difference? Is this going to lead to accountability in the budgets and finances? So I think that's always that's something that more and more needs to be focused on. A final example is, I'm not sure, but I'm sure many people are aware of the Living Wage project. So this is again a collaboration between journalism and a data tool that seeks to make people engage with the living conditions of domestic workers in South Africa. There's a powerful connection of telling the story of a real need and then using a data tool to bring the story into the home of the user. So what I think is really interesting about this, and so it's not necessarily around, but it is obviously around a social and civil society issue, but there was a lot of really great journalism that was done on trying to understand the context of a domestic worker and what they go through. And so this is the story of Primrose, and it gives the video of her talking. It brings the story to life. We can read through her story. There are the ability to understand what her wage conditions are and what she has to pay and what her salary goes towards. We can see an example of how WasiMap, which we saw earlier, can be brought into something like a website or a blog post, the right issues for the right. So she lives in Ward 94, trying to understand what the income breakdown is from the census, trying to understand the sector of employment, and then also being able to understand her story in more depth to bring about hopefully more empathy. And so as we scroll through, we can see the work that was done on this. So the civic technology role in this was to now take this story, this journalism story, which really speaks to something that is a South African issue, which is the conditions and wages of domestic workers, and says, well, how do we get people engaging with this? And so they created a tool which enables you to put in how much you pay your domestic worker. And I think what they said is that most people put in about 130 Rand per day. And so when you calculate the expenses, now all of a sudden the first thing it tells us is it kicks out as, well, you're only covering 56% of your domestic worker's household minimum need. So people get angry about this. If there are people that employ a domestic worker, they say, how can you say we're doing this, or, you know, we think we're doing fine. And then it gives you the opportunity to say, well, okay, let's see. Let's see. So we're saying that the minimum need is 556. Adjust these assumptions to your specific situation and see what happens. Maybe transportation costs 13 Rand a day. You know, maybe the housing cost is less or more. But essentially, what was, I think, quite an interesting outcome of this is that it had a lot of people, especially, you know, sort of upper middle class and middle class people, quite enraged that they were being accused of paying someone too little, especially someone that was in their homes and has performed such a foundational role for them. But what really the outcome is that more raging against themselves, because when you look into the sources and the assumptions, they're pretty solid, and if you have any arguments, you're more than welcome to change them. And now they weren't meant to be that every single situation and every single metric or every single variable that a domestic worker experiences, but just to tell a story. So firstly, this is a thing, and I think it really has made an impact on people with access to internet and with people who employ domestic workers. Where I think the next steps for this project could really be powerful is how do we take this project and frame it in a way that empowers domestic workers to get a better situation for themselves. And so whereas, this has been a great story. It started with a journalist interested in a real need, finding a problem and finding a user that has that problem and telling a story. And then the civic technology team at Code for South Africa went and built a great tool which helps us to engage with the situation. But now what is the next step, and what is the transfer to make this something that can really make an impact? And I think the real impact that needs to come out of this is that domestic workers need to have more power, and they need to be paid more. And so what is the tool, project, process, human side, CSO that's going to take on that, and how are they going to make sure that this turns into something that is really interesting and informative and useful to a degree, to something that can make a real difference. And I think that's really exciting. I think that's the next step. So I think just to summarize talking about some of the different projects, and as you've seen, they've been heavily led by Code for South Africa. I think they all give us slightly different perspectives. The ways in which projects can initiate from an interested citizen, from a civic technology institute, from a CSO, importantly, then there can be this collaboration of both technology and human process so critically to make a difference. We've seen examples of where some of the foundational CSOs in our country are engaging with technology to make an impact and the impact it's having. And we've seen the importance of needing to understand the project from the context of the user and the problem and not the solution. And that the technology, as an example that I've mentioned probably all 3 days, that technology isn't the water, it's just the pipe. And the water is really the real impact or the change. So I think that's a real critical thing. But what I'd like to really talk about now, as you listen to this webinar, and as you start to engage with some of those projects, you as a CSO, or as someone who represents an MPO, or someone who's an interested citizen, or someone who wants to engage with an issue, where can you go from here? How do you create the Living Wage project? How do you get involved in doing a community-based tool? Well, I think that there is a lot of significant opportunities, and I think they around collaboration on projects, as we've seen, and potential funding for these projects. I'd like to talk a little bit about a new initiative that we've started with Code for South Africa, and then just the importance of including media partners. So what I've done on this slide is just provide links to the people who are involved in the civic technology movement to some degree in South Africa. And I think just the first thing to be aware of is, what is a civic technology MPO? What is a Code for South Africa or an open data driven? It is a team of people who have access to technology skills or have resources, the ability to build a technology tool, and that exists to bridge the gap, informational gap, and data and analysis gap between different sectors of society, very importantly between government and people, and between CSOs and governments and people, and the media. But just to understand that this movement is growing and that there are these organizations that are there that have the resources to be able to take an impact that you're having and to be able to offer, and not always, technology is not always going to be the answer, but to do something with working with your organization's data, your client records, the statistics about where you're having impact, your actual statistics of impact and monitoring, evaluation, feedback from people, and just use technology as something to potentially widen and deepen the sphere of influence and the impact. And this is what is happening with civic technology at the moment. We have Code for South Africa who have pioneered it and have really started to make a really big impact. My organization, Open Data Durban, is especially or specifically focused on the city of eThekwini, but also very much on the idea that we can make a change locally rather than nationally, and that instead of taking this top-down approach to development, which has got enough support, potentially, we are the people, and when I say we, as communities, we are the people who understand the problems, not myself as an individual, but me and my community. I know that the people who are going through the everyday situation and the people that have the problems are there and not sitting in somewhere in a central planning meeting in Pretoria. And that's by being able to create toolkits, examples, projects, tools, dialogues, advocacy for the gathering and transfer of information and for evidence-based decision-making and informed decision-making, that as a Civic Technology Institute we can assist people who are servicing those problems, especially organizations, especially CBO or community-based organizations that are working at the, as we say, at the coalface, so working where the real problem, the real need is, and we can potentially do something to assist that. And it's what makes me very excited. And if you're up in the Joburg or Gauteng way, Hacks Hackers is a group that meets in Johannesburg, Hacks being journalists and Hackers being technologists. And they are also involved, quite involved in this movement. Geek Culture in Pretoria as part of the Innovation Hub is someone we've been recently collaborating on with events. And Code for South Africa, Open Data Durban, and Geek Culture are now starting to run what we call hackathons or workshops that happen in the 3 cities of Pretoria, Durban, and Cape Town. And we're looking to expand to Kimberley, and to Nelspruit, and to East London, and to wherever else we can. And then to talk, we did talk a little bit about Code for Africa, who also work across the African continent and are the federated organization of civic technology movements outside of South Africa across the continent. And I think just understanding, firstly, that it's possible to please approach us if you have any need, that us as organizations have access to resources and also significantly to funding to work into a need. And so what we're very keen to do is to understand the need and to understand how we might help, and then to also understand how it might be sustainably resourced. And as we go through talking about something just now, the COBIDGE program, just talked to this idea of sustainability, and that's something I think is really important for us, is how does this project continue to have an impact? How does it firstly have an impact? How does it lead to real change? And then how can we understand this change happening again and again so that it can move to sustainability? And so having access to grants or donor funding is one avenue, but also where are the opportunities for support from business, from community, from government, from the ability to turn the tool into something that can support itself. And so I think these are all really interesting stories. But to talk about the collaboration on projects, how did these come about? How did the Living Wage project happen? How did the WASIMAP happen? It's often just about CSO or CBO being in the same room as a civic technologist, and them saying, hey, we have this problem, and the civic technologist saying, hey, we have this problem, and how can we help each other out? And so I think like joining a community, and so this speaks a lot to what I was talking about at the end of yesterday's webinar, if you take a look through webinar number 2. But joining a community, being aware of, and as you click, you can click through on all of these logos. It will take you through to their, the opportunities that you can join these communities, going to knowledge share evenings, joining a workshop, which just really speaks to come and learning something. Why don't you come along and learn something new, learn something about data or technology, be exposed to these projects and be exposed to the kind of people who might be able to build them for you or to work with you on them. But also just to understand that as a CSO or CBO that you're naturally in the driving seat. You're the one who understands the problem the best. You're the one who understands the user the best. And so that's why it is really such an important role that, or such an important rule that the CBO or the CSO is in the driving seat in terms of these projects. and that's how we want to set things up. The second thing I'd like to talk about is this CodeBridge program that we started to build, and we launched. The CodeBridge is a civic tech incubator. It's a collaboration between Code for South Africa and Open Data Durban for now. But really, we're seeing that there's a lot of interest, and I think there's going to be a lot of partners on board. And why this is pertinent for opportunities for civic technology in South Africa for CSOs is that firstly, there is the role that civic technology can play in your organization and projects as it exists at the moment. So where is the tool or website or app or poster or infographic or data analysis or survey or feedback that you can implement right now in your project or your organization that will make a difference? And that really speaks to the first thing of collaborating with Code for SA or an Open Data Durban or anyone else who's involved in this movement. Anyone else who's a technologist. But the second thing is when you have an idea or a new initiative or a new project or even a project that needs to be revamped or pivoted, so in other words the project might change direction or change focus, this is a program which offers a little bit of support to this. As an incubator, so incubators generally exist to find and develop technology startups, and so something that's been very successful in the world is all of these tech startups out of America and other places that have been incubated, so put in an environment which made it easy for them to grow. And then, so what we're doing is we're trying to create that, but taking a step further by drawing from community and fostering creative engagement between those who understand the problems, typically civil society and government, and those that have the technological skills that can help them. And so what we're trying to do with this program is to bridge the gap between grassroots activism, technology, and data. So to bring together activists, technologists, journalists, data analysts, designers, programmers, and everyone else to create opportunities for innovations and alternative ways to address some of society's challenges. So we want to use civic technology to improve lives through efficiency, transparency, and connecting citizens to service. So really understanding that this is a need because of what's happened in the past, and then learning from the projects and examples that I've mentioned before to make it into a program which can make real change and real difference in the future. And so what we're doing with this program, and this is an example of a program that I can talk about because we're involved in building it, but obviously there's hopefully going to be more and more of these things coming out of this movement nationally, and I just encourage you to take just to be keeping to looking for them. So incubation services means training and tailored boot camps, mentorship, we're focusing on business strategy, focusing on funding assistance, and providing working space for literally for people with projects that want to be developed into CSOs or an MPO, with an MPO with a project that they want to see successful and they want to grow. We're even interested in understanding where there's opportunities for civic technology startups, so a company that is building some product for the common good, and if we can help them get onto their feet. So really, the way that we carry this out is to run events to encourage learning, and so now that might be a data quest or a workshop or a hackathon. And so I understand that hackathons and data quests are really intimidating sometimes, and that you might feel like you're going there to be an observer. The ironic thing is that the person who comes from the context of a problem, so the person who's working in a CBO or CSO, is far more valuable to a data quest or to a hackathon than anyone else because they understand the problem that needs to be addressed and they understand the user. And so just encouraging you, if you feel like up to it, going to a data quest or hackathon that gets held in the city, and those links above will tell you where they're happening. But also just to engage on a one-on-one, and I've included a lot of information and details about how to contact me, how to contact Code for SA. So just dropping an email, you know, something we spoke about yesterday and the day before was using Google to ask dumb questions, and that, you know, from my personal perspective, everything that I've been able to do has often come, or a lot of what I've been able to do has come from asking dumb questions to Google. So that, I mean, obviously the idea that there are no dumb questions. And so sending along a question or query, no matter how simple you think it is, can lead to something, can lead to a project or an idea, and I think that's really important. So the mismatch of, I mean, the matching together of people from CSOs, CVOs that have understanding of problems and users, technologists, journalists, leads to the generation of new ideas. So an idea of how we might be able to solve something, and the formation of civic tech partnerships and collaborations which can bring the kind of projects that we saw previously to life. And the big focus of this CodeBridge program is that it seeks to serve community partners on the ground. So just to understand what a bootcamp might look like, it brings a focused or startup-like approach, so an incubation-like approach to social innovation and impact projects and ideas. And so we will take someone on this who comes to a bootcamp or a workshop, and when we mentor people, we will take them on a journey of understanding user-centered design, which speaks to empathizing with the user and the problem. So you can see there it takes you on a journey of, well, if we're going to design an impact or advocacy or a project or a tool or a website, let's empathize with the person who has the problem and understand the problem, define it, so ideate, so brainstorm and come up with any ideas that might solve this problem, create a prototype, so create a tool or create an app or create a website very quickly that we think might help address the problem, and then to test it with this user and to repeat this process again and again, so to iterate as fast as possible. And this speaks to reversing the idea that we would work long and hard on a project and take a long time to come out with a deliverable right at the end, and rather to fail forward or fail early in a way that we can learn and then to make the project or the impact bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's get a prototype out and let's test whether the budget project is working for the right people. Let's get it out early in a rough draft, and let's have their feedback so that we can make it better, and then do that again and get more feedback and make it better, so that it's actually servicing the need of the person with the problem. We also will go through how to create a pitch to funders and to donors to understand the one pager of your initiative or your project. So how to, and just, I mean, as I walk through, I'm taking us through this CodeBridge program, but it's really, these are tools that are very useful to be used even if you know, without needing to engage with us. So just really to take away that there's a lot of useful techniques that we can use to try and make projects and impacts sustainable. Another one being this elevator pitch or this lean canvas, which takes our project and helps us really understand it in the context of all the important factors like purpose and what the problem is we're trying to solve, and who the customers are or people, users, and who will adopt them first, what the solution is we're proposing, what makes it unique, how there's financial sustainability and what the costs are, what the impact will be. And so really what I think is a really amazing thing about this program and about doing this, if you do it with a civic technology partner or working with a technology partner in the space, be it us or not, is the development of, you know, you can develop your budgets, your financial model, your sustainability and funding, your mission and problem statements, understanding the market. And I mean, the market is just speaking to the people who use the tool or the project that you build to change. It doesn't need to be sold, it's not commercial. Building your team and your structure, the technical prototype, so the version of the tool or app or poster or website and the users, and trying to understand how they engage with it, who the stakeholders are, and then just having mentoring and support coming from us. And then finally, and maybe significantly, having access to channels of funders who are interested in funding projects that will make a difference and will have some social impact. And so we are aware of funders that are very interested in, and the funders that are attached to these programs that will look at projects, and especially because we're able to develop them in an incubation kind of environment, so we can iron out some of the problems and risks, they're very keen to fund these and to push them forward. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for partnerships between CSOs and civic technology institutes or organizations. So if you're interested in being part of the program or finding out more, please send a mail through to Code for SA or to Open Durban. All my details are on this as well. And then I think the final thing I wanted to iterate or reiterate and talk about is just the importance of the media partners. I have spoken about it, so we don't need to go into too much detail. But the ability to engage with media, to be a transfer of information and to taking a story to a wide group of people is huge, can make a huge difference to the impact of a project. Something that's been quite amazing for me to see as I came into this world was how the world of civic technology was how much of a relationship the civic technology has with media houses, as do many of the existing CEOs and CSOs and MPOs that work in South Africa. And I think being able to connect through to telling your story through one of those organizations can be very powerful. For example, Code for SA is running a data journalism school where they teach journalists to use data, and journalists are looking for stories to tell. I actually was teaching down at the school, and it was really amazing to see what happens when we start to get journalists working with data about a problem that's being brought forth by civil society organizations. And so I think that's a very powerful mix and something to look for in your projects. So that basically sums up the webinar for today. There's a lot of information once again to click through and to engage with. These are all the details of social details of my organization and my contact details, and I'd really encourage you to get involved with the civic technology movement, to email or phone or tweet or whatever you'd like me to ask me about the stuff if there's anything else you need to know, to connect you through to different people, to come to our events, to mix it up with technologists and see what exciting things might come out. So thank you so much for listening. It's been a real privilege to be able to speak to you over the last 3 days, over the last 3 webinars. And just as a closing note, I would really encourage anyone who listens to this to engage with some of the other webinars that's happened through the digital influencing projects that Oxfam carried out. They really have excellent information about a variety of topics such as Facebook, how to use Facebook, how to use mobile, how to run a digital strategy. And so I really encourage you to check out the blog and engage with that content because it can really help you make a difference in your impact. Thank you. I think I'm going to hand over to Nick and Wendell now.
Thanks so much, Richard. That was really interesting. And I think, yes, there's lots of information out there, and it's really great to have some of the more data-related topics on the blog. So I have been updating the blog, and I will send around the link. But some of the things, Richard, that I found really interesting from your presentation was around us becoming active citizens, I should say, and taking a more active role, and how data and technology can help us along that path. So I found that really interesting. So thanks for reminding us to become active in our own context. And I think that looking at our bylaws, I think that was so interesting. You know, it's something you don't really think about, and it's something that affects all of our lives. So I found that really interesting. And then I also was really interested to see, in terms of the living wage, how stories are being incorporated into the tools and the data sets, which I think is also a really interesting combination of making sure that we don't just look at the data and the tools, but we also bring that human face and the stories into the data sets that we look at. So I found that really interesting, that the stories are also coming through quite strongly, which is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the connection to humans and people,
Yes.
you know, this is sometimes, as technologists, I think we forget that there is a human on the other side of a phone or a computer. Really, from the context of us as communities and people, that's all that matters. And so, you know, I really think what I was saying about that human and the process side can't be spoken enough.
Yes.
That an app won't change the world. An app transferring something of real impact will change the world.
Yes. Yes, so really, really interesting. And I also wanted to stress to any listeners that also looking at the partnerships and collaborations, and many times there's people out there that have similar interests and similar objectives to what we do, and the different expertise that come together is really important, that we each bring a different set of skills and experiences, and those can complement and work together to achieve our aim. So I think the idea of collaborations and partnerships is also an important one. So thanks for raising that.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
So we have a question up, thanks Nick, from Alroy. Alroy, I don't know if you've got a microphone on. Would you like to share your question directly? I've unmuted you, Alroy. Any luck, Alroy? No.
Wendell,
Yeah.
I know earlier Elroy was having some connection issues,
Okay.
so it might be linked to that. However, it wasn't so much a question as a comment, I believe.
Okay.
So I just said to him that I would post it up so everyone could see.
Okay. So I know that Black Sash and Code for SA have been working quite closely together on various projects, and Richard spoke earlier about making all voices count, and there we go. I see Elroy has raised his hand. Elroy, do you want to give it a go?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Can you
Hi,
hear me?
Elroy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Richard.
Hi,
You had us you had us blushing 1,700 kilometers away. Yeah, no, but
Well,
thank
I'm
you.
sure
I missed the question because I lost connection.
So we were wondering if you wanted to chat through your comment and share some of the examples from your side in terms of some of the work you've been doing.
Yeah, thank you for the space, but I was very pleasantly surprised, and as Black Sash, we're humbled that the presentation focused so much on the work that we're doing. But it reminds us that collectively using technology, using rights education and helping people to understand the responsibility about their access to these rights, using citizen-based monitoring and advocacy emerging from the evidence on the ground, and in particular the posters you spoke about. We've got copies of these, so we can send it to you as an example. Maybe if you deem it fit, it would be a good example of the data generated with the support of Code for SA, who did all the incredible behind-the-scenes work, to have this A1 sheet discussed, and then what it does, we found, I think Richard alluded to the fact that the advocacy and the dialogue that emerges from technology civil society initiatives to hold the state and service providers of public services in particular to account, enables the problem to be identified. Like in the case of the citizen-based monitoring, I'm using that because it's the best one I know. Somebody, in the case of SASSA, the poster can point to the fact that, you know, the staff attitudes at this SASSA point in Mitchell's Plain is terrible. Thank you. We will deal with it immediately. But the junior manager, the facility manager, who for years has been speaking to the regional manager or the district manager and says, I have too little staff, especially when it's pay point time and ablution facilities, points to a structural resource-based problem. And now the citizens are saying what the manager has been saying all along. And then in the work that I do at the national level, SASSA, as an example, would say, oh no, we have our policy in place and the recourse mechanism is working very well, and if there's a query, please dial this number. And then we tell the story through Code for SA and Ground Up and civil society-led journalists' work, and we say, no, but that's not true. Here's the story of Mr. Barney. And Mr. Barney is a real man, an 80-year-old gentleman who had to go to 15 different places to get his money back, which we as especially middle and upper class citizens will not tolerate. So the action that emerges from evidence-based monitoring, supported especially with a quick turnaround time, is critical. I just want to say one last thing. You know, when our citizen-based monitoring work started in 2008, what we used to do, believe it or not, Richard, you can laugh, it's okay. We had standardized questionnaires on paper that we posted to the via the South African Post Office to all our partners across the country. And we planned, I don't know where we got the number from, to get 10,000 forms back. Now, despite the, okay, let me not go there about the quality of service of the post office of late, but we got 8,964 forms back on paper.
Wow.
But what we couldn't do was disaggregate quickly, because somebody had to sit in an Excel spreadsheet and type up all the stuff, and 3 months later, people are saying, yeah, but this data doesn't mean anything anymore. So Code for SA, the Clear Institute, Info for Africa, Debbie Eustace and her unit helped us experiment with this using USSD platforms, non-smartphones, to do surveys, to have a quick turnaround time. So for us, we felt on top of the world when we did a quick survey, people answered, we went for lunch, and we came back, and there was the report. And this is facility-based. And in a very short period of time, we've moved so fast. And I would argue that in this regard, South Africa is leading globally. I know that because I can't talk much about it, but there was an invitation in the monitoring and evaluation unit in the presidency. There's a project called Twende Mbele, where Benin, Uganda, and African countries are interested in this work that you just discussed now. They want to emulate it, and we want to learn from them. So we're really on something major where we combine the action with the findings. So well done, and thank you very much.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. That's really interesting and so encouraging that we're setting the trend. Hey.
Yes. I mean, I also want to just thank you, Aura. It's really been a privilege to have you on this webinar.
You did an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think just so many good examples, so much more depth than I could understand about the impact. But I think also I do believe that in South Africa we are leading in a lot of areas in this. I also know the example of the MiniSAS water quality, river quality monitoring tool that's also now been turned into a civic technology tool that's now being replicated across the world, and sort of South Africa is leading the way in that. And so it's nice to see that across the board. You know, maybe this talk is delivering more to the choir than anyone else, because CSOs are more comfortable or starting to become more comfortable engaging with civic technology than other countries even. So that's exciting to hear.
Okay. Thank you again.
Wow. And Elroy, tell us a little bit about the launch on Tuesday. The Tuesday next week, I take it.
Yeah, while I was listening to the webinar, I was talking to Dina Bosch, who is the person that led the Making All Voices Count. The name of the project is going to be called Umkapi Wompakati, which I'm told means watching for the community, as it's on the webinar. Thank you. And I think it's a wonderful initiative. I don't think I can speak on her behalf, but I think in this short time we've grown so much from strength to strength. And if I could just talk briefly about the next steps for the Black Sash, is there's a list at the bottom that's going to be populated. I will send and tweet the contacts for the organizations that are getting involved on the ground. I mean, especially rural advice officers. In this regard, and then the Code for SA is assisting us, and we've already begun with the software and the app to use the application for recourse. In other words, as a complaint mechanism and demanding answers at the facility level in order to either prove the fact that the recourse mechanism, when I refer to recourse, it's people who have had money stolen from their SASSA bank accounts, airtime, etc., deductions not stopping, and holding SASA especially to account to say it's working, it's not working. Thank you that Mr. Baiani's money was paid back, but here's to me it's the most offensive thing. A rural disabled woman whose money has been cleaned out of her account by unscrupulous, immoral people. And so Code for SA is assisting us to develop a tool for advocacy. And I think that's an important step. And we have to use it responsibly and not make false accusations, of course, that we're very sensitive about. But it's absolutely critical that this kind of work needs to be replicated in other spaces.
Yes. Well, I mean, for me, the first thing that pops into my mind is in terms of the local clinic committees and how the clinic committees in communities around the country are not all functioning at optimal level, and how such an app, I wondered if could be adapted for the health sector and looking at local level service delivery. For me, that would be really fantastic.
Well, that's a good idea. I'm sure it could be.
Yeah.
No, that's really fascinating. Well, I'll Google watching for the community and send around some information.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
And thanks
Thank you for this opportunity to share this with you.
Sorry.
It's Tuesday the 22nd of March.
Yeah, that's right.
Tuesday the 22nd of March 2016, just for those listening after this.
So thanks very much, Aura. That's really interesting. It's nice to hear an update that Black Sash is doing so well and pioneering the way for Africa. So it's really lovely to hear such good news.
Okay, thank you. It's a collective effort. I think a lot of the work was pioneered. Code for SA, in terms of the CBOs, NGOs we know, worked with the Parliamentary Monitoring Group, pmg.org.za. So if any of the listeners of this webinar wants to really see how very technical, heavy information of the PMG website, pmg.org.za, is converted into infograms and have your MPs tweet and have Bantu Molomisa fight with an ANC MP and you watch the debate, go to the sister site of PMG called www.pa.org.za, People's Assembly, www.pa.org.za, and just start browsing very complex reports that are voluminous with words and diagrams are put in an infogram, and then you click for the next piece of information, and we're very proud of that. When I say we, Black Sash was one of the founder members, and I represent Black Sash on the board along with a colleague. So it is when the president said they want to move Parliament to Pretoria, I just said, "Whoa, that's not going to happen," because PMG is not going to Pretoria. And I think we underestimate. This is the point, Richard. We underestimate the power of the information we generate. As long as it's credible, we underestimate the impact of well-resourced, well-researched, carefully crafted pieces of information that is shared in the public domain.
Absolutely. And I think that through the work that you're doing in other organizations, with the feedback and the monitoring and the actual engagement with people, it really helps us to understand more and more how big that impact is and to see it in action. So I think that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, so exciting. Thanks so much, Elroy. It was really nice to have you as part of the webinar.
Oh, thank you so much. All strength to Oxfam.
Oh,
may your future be bright, and may you be in a place where you want to be.
Thanks very much, Elroy. Yes, it's been quite lovely to finish off our last month with the webinar series. So it's been quite nice to be able to do our last one. So thanks all for joining. It's been really nice.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks very much, Richard. I think that was really helpful, and it was nice to have the input from Black Sash and from Elroy, and to hear about the exciting work around becoming more active in terms of how we engage with, whether it's pieces of legislation going through Parliament, whether it's environmental assessments that are happening in our communities, whether it's our bylaws. So I think it's really interesting to see the different ways that we can engage with activities that are happening around us. So let's all go out and be active citizens and do our bit. So thanks very much, Richard. It's been a really interesting series, and just to remind everybody of the website, I have started loading some of the information onto the digital influencing site. So to remind you of the address, it's Oxfam in South Africa, access.wordpress.com, and you'll see some of the program from the original event that we hosted in 2013, the webinar series that we hosted in 2015. So that was the 10-part webinar series that looked at various social media platforms, and then the webinar series now in 2016 looking at data. So go and check out some of the past webinars, and feel free to comment and blog and add any resources. So these will stay up and be there for you to refer to in the future. So thanks very much, Nicholas, for hosting us over the last 3 days and managing all the technical side. And thanks to all the attendees. It's been lovely to know that you're out there and that you're interested in different ideas around using data. And thanks very much to you, Richard, for coming on board and hosting the 3-part webinar series with us.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege.
Excellent. And thanks,
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good afternoon and enjoy the long weekend and the time off, and hopefully you've got some exciting plans for your public holidays. Cheers. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.